Bienvenidos a Tres Respuestas, un espacio de conversación, de discusión y de propuestas. Nuestro invitado de hoy es un gran amigo, empresario, emprendedor, filántropo y sobre todo un gran amigo de Colombia y un gran amigo del desarrollo y de la juventud. Se trata de George Logothetis, fundador y cabeza del grupo Libra, un grupo empresarial internacional que está en distintas áreas de negocio, está en los temas de logística, operación marítima, tecnología y ahora también recientemente tecnología espacial. Está desarrollando también hotelería, adelanta inversiones en Colombia, ha estado en energías renovables, pero también es el fundador de Libra Philanthropies, una organización filantrópica que apoya distintas causas sociales. Y me complace mucho tenerlo acá en Bogotá, en la Fundación Innovación para el Desarrollo, también agradeciendo el apoyo a través de Libra Philanthropies para poner en marcha el programa Dreamers and Makers. George, such a pleasure to have you in Bogotá. It's a pleasure to have you again here in the Foundation Innovation for Development. And most importantly, thank you for trusting and doing so much in Colombia.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Always.
Well, George, let me begin the way that we regularly start these conversations. Many people who are listening to us have seen your record, your profile. They know that there's a very nice success story behind. But I want to start asking, who is George Logothetis? How would you define yourself? And why don't you tell us a little bit about where were you born? How was your process in life to climb up such a successful ladder?
Thank you, Iván. Well, who is George? First of all, George is Nitya's husband. George is the father of 4 wonderful children, and it all starts there. I grew up in London, in North London. My father grew up in East Africa. My mother grew up in Wales. They had very little, but they also had a lot. So the little was, on occasions, there was no food. They had to flee Greece after the Second World War because Greece was a wrecked country. But they also had everything. The everything part was the immigrant blood, the purpose, the desire to become more than, the intention to help their children become the best version of themselves. The gift of belief is often the greatest gift you can give to anyone, especially someone that has not believed him. So I was blessed to be believed in. I was blessed to be empowered. I was blessed to be given responsibility. You can't grow if you're not made responsible. I was blessed to be given the opportunity to fail, but then not be unduly criticized by my failures. So I grew up in London. I now live in New York with my wife and my 4 kids. Many years ago, when I met my wife, someone said to me, "Where is home for you, George?" And I said, "Home is where Nitya is." And it still is.
But that's a great answer.
Thank you.
I am
true.
I'm going to start using it as well. I have to say,
Oh, but it's true. I'm very blessed like that.
George, you were born in Greece, right?
London.
London.
Yes.
And you moved to the States, what, 25 years ago, 20 years ago?
So I moved to the States, actually, on the 5th of January, 2005. So in 1 month, I will have been there for 20 years.
Okay, and there's something very interesting. Your parents, and I had the privilege of meeting your father, said that since you were a kid, they wanted to give you responsibility. Yes. And teach you the value of things, let you find the value of things, understand the value of hard work. And when you were almost ending your teenage time, you were called by your parents and they said to you, "You know, George, we want you to take the lead of the family business." At that time, it was a very successful but also stressful shipping conglomerate, or starting to be a conglomerate, and you changed all the premises. And then you said, okay, let's switch from shipping to making this a global group of multi-purpose business. How did that happen? I mean, when you were asked to take that lead, you were, 19 years old, and many kids at that time are thinking, where are they going to go for college? What are they going to do to party on the weekend? How are they going to enjoy free time? But at that time, you were so mature that you took a family responsibility, and your life changed, but you also changed, and it developed and evolved family business?
So it sounds more glamorous today than it felt then. It didn't feel glamorous at that time. What happened was, it was a very difficult time for my family. My parents were divorcing. That's complicated in any family. And we had a difficult time in our business. My father had managed to build a company from nothing, which is his legacy. That's not easy. We had a few ships. We didn't have a lot of capital, but we had a company, and that's his achievement in life. So what happened was, there wasn't like an anointment of George. And what happened was, it was progressive throughout 1994 that I started to feel that the ultimate decisions became more mine than my father's. My father is a very kind, good man, as you know, as you met him, and kind, good people suffer a lot. In some ways, they can suffer more, right? So that's how it occurred 30.5 years ago. But the why is more important than the what. So why? Why was my family very ambitious? Why did we want to become more than? And it's because we were blessed to have been looked down upon. So if you are looked down upon, but the tribe that is looked down upon is united and has love and a common purpose, you can weaponize the lack of belief in yourself to become the best version of yourself. So I started working when I was 17, 18. I never went to university. I'm self-educated. I'm reading books. I had many sicknesses as a child. I spent many, many months in bed. Never resented it because I was loved. But I used the time. What is lost time and what is found time? And I always remember being a teenager and a young man in my early 20s, being very unwell, but thinking to myself, I have to use this time. So that's our common shared love for history. My love for history started then. So what then happened was I worked with my father for 10 years running the shipping business. We grew the shipping business. We didn't have capital. We didn't have access to capital in the traditional sense. But we had a lot of capital in the untraditional sense. Coraje, motivation, unity, a common purpose. And those 10 years, my father and I lived 30 lifetimes in those 10 years. But somehow, the Greek expression is ta kataferame. We overcame, we achieved it. So by the time I was 28 years old, Lomar, the shipping business, had a big fleet of 50 to 55 vessels, which we had built up, one ship at a time, one creative transaction at a time. No one said to us, here's $10 million, go and do it. We had to create everything, every step of the way. And we worked as a partnership. We were a team, together. So then I took a sabbatical, because I am a huge believer in less is more, and reflection is more important than reactivity. So I took a sabbatical. I went to New York. I spent 3 months off. But off means off, not checking anything, just disconnecting. And I think if you are blessed with a fine mind, and that mind is disconnected from the grid, and you go analog for a time, the purity of your thoughts become more pure. So the idea to set up what became Libra, because at the time it was just an idea, there was no brand, there was no company, came to me in October of 2003, so 21 years ago. I was walking by the Plaza Hotel as basically a student in New York. I enrolled in a university, and I spent 2 months there learning a little bit. And I thought to myself, my God, the shipping markets are very high right now. We have to sell some of the ships. But the ship owner that has 55 ships doesn't want to be the ship owner that has 20 ships. You want to grow. So I thought to myself, what if we do something else outside of shipping? This will give us the psychological freedom to sell some of the ships. So I wrote a list on a piece of paper of all the places in the world that we wanted to be in over the next 20 years when I'm in an analog, pure state of thinking. And next to each country, put the name of a person that was within our shipping company at the time. And then when I got back from my sabbatical, we started sending them around the world. And that is the genesis of how Libra was created. Now, nothing was easy. No day has been easy. We don't do easy.
But let me ask something there, George.
Yeah.
You had worked with your father. You had learned from him. You had your own approaches to things. And then you took the lead. And what was beautiful also is the trust that your father gave to you. He
Yes.
said, I trust you, go ahead. But then there's something quite risky, if I may use that word, is when you said, you know what, I'm going to sell all the vessels. And we're going to raise that capital, we're going to make smart investment, and maybe we'll come back to shipping at some point. But how was that decision made by a 19, 20-year-old after all this business had worked? What were your guts? What were your analysis? And also tell us, how did that work? Because I think that has been one of your most riskiest, boldest, and successful decisions ever made.
Thank you. It was a bold decision. So the decision to sell the ships was when I was 28. It was 2003.
So almost 10 years after then,
Yes.
you took the
we
lead.
built the fleet from 2 ships up to 50 to 55 ships, and then a shipping boom came. So there's the technical reasoning, which is the ships are old, so our ships were very old, and you have a chance to cash out before the market goes down. The technical reason that no shipping boom lasts forever. The technical reason that our ships were more complicated ships. They were refrigerated vessels. So you have a window to sell. So this is all the, let's say, the technical side. But the decision was driven by instinct. And not wanting to be greedy. And not wanting to be limited by being just a shipping company. So again, it goes back to having been looked down upon, having not been believed in, and wanting to prove people wrong. You know, wanting to prove the naysayers wrong. I prefer the yes-sayers. I know you prefer the yes-sayers, but naysayers exist too. So the instinct side was driven by almost like a linear feeling that this boom is not going to last. But you know, and having the courage to not be greedy. It's something someone said to me 30 years ago: buy expensive, sell cheap. So what that means is, because it sounds counterintuitive, right? Why would you buy expensive? But what it means is, when the shipping market is low, and the vessel costs $1 million, buy it for 1.1. So don't be greedy. You know, take a bigger view, take a broader view. You are protected by the timing of your buying. Then you have to survive the difficult years, and then one day, hopefully, the vessel becomes worth more, and it becomes worth 5 million. Sell it for 4.5. So don't be greedy. Be fixed, you know, and clear-minded in the decision-taking process. And that's always been our way. And the last thing I would say to you, Iván, which is very important, is the body language of the markets. The body language doesn't lie. The body language won't lie. So the body language is something that when I was 28 and only been exposed to shipping markets, and you see the boom coming, people would be, I don't want to say arrogant, but overconfident perhaps. But a little bit of hubris comes in. And then during those weeks and months of the shipping boom, I would also meet people in the aviation sector. And this would be the opposite, because the aviation market was very low at the time. So it again goes back to having perspective. So if you only see one market, it's harder to have perspective of other markets. But if you or me at the age of 28, 29, when we set up Libra, and you're having a meeting with shipping people, very confident after 6 difficult years, all of a sudden the confidence comes back. But then you see aviation people the next day who are very unconfident after 5 very bad years. You think, buy low, sell high. It's not complicated.
Right.
The concept is very simple. The execution of it, of course, was very not so easy.
When I look at what Libra is today, and you see a group that has investments in shipping, that has investments in aviation, that is also making a big bet on electric aviation for tourism. When you look at hotels, when you look at luxury, when you look at services. But there's something also interesting. You're thinking on space and the space services. So it's a very diversified group. Takes a lot of your time to be following what every company is doing. But you have a very attractive method of work. with all the lines of business, and still keeping the group to be a family-owned group. How do you get to manage those two realities? Still being a family-owned group, very diversified, having different lines of business, and keeping control and giving the right guidelines for every business to work. What are your habits? What are your virtues? What are your the leadership trends that you use for this? And if I may put a little bit of pepper to the question, there's a Greek word that you love a lot that is philotimos. Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how to respond to the question, and how do you introduce philotimos in that response?
So first of all, the whole business comes from an empowerment model. So let's start there. And that why? Because that's what happened to me. That's what I grew up with, being empowered. So I got a job when I was 13. My first job was at 13. I worked for 2 months in a greengrocer, and I remember myself changing, like in real time, by being made responsible, by serving people, by saying good morning to someone. So the whole ethos of Libra Group is empowerment-based. If it's control-based, you can't do it. You can't make it. So empowerment with governance. Now, I would say that the philotimo concept, which is a very old Greek, ancient Greek expression, technically it means the love of honor. It also means the duty to be respectful. Can you still be kind when others are cruel? Can you be kind when others are cruel? Or does the cruelty of others make you less kind? You know, cruelty is going to happen. It's going to come to all of us. You know this better than anyone, right? But can we still keep ourselves centered? Can we give more than we take? So that concept is also, to a certain extent, how I grew up in the world of shipping, because the world of shipping that I grew up in, your word is your bond, but also legally. So if in shipping you lift board approval, you are bound with your words. So that's how I grew up. And I remember when we left the shipping business and we started going to other businesses, it doesn't exactly work like that. In other businesses, a transaction is done when it's signed and the contract is signed. And it's only legally binding at that point in time. And it took me and our shipping people a lot of time to understand that. So let's start with empowerment, creating future leaders, allowing for failure. We're all going to fail. Not hitting people when they fail. Of course, if someone fails doing the same thing repeat, then they have to lose their job. I mean, it's a business at the end of the day. Space. Let me tell you the genesis of the space business, which you may find interesting. So look at a lot of the businesses of Libra. They are leasing based. So what is a shipping business? You own the ship, you rent the ship out. What is an energy business? You build an energy park, you lease the electricity. What is a helicopter business? You own the helicopters and you lease them. So you met yesterday Fedra Crusos, the chief strategy officer of the group. And there was a time at the end of 2022 where I asked Fedra to go to the west coast of the United States, which is still the innovation spring of planet Earth, to import innovation into our group. And then we had a meeting several months afterwards, and she mentioned that she went and met a satellite company called Astranis, who we are talking about partnering with now. And something went off in my brain. Something went off in George's mind. I said, is there a space leasing business? Because it was some of the expressions that Fedra was using. I just made the connection with leasing. And she said, what do you mean, George? I said, is there a space leasing business in this world? i.e. a business that leases space equipment. So go to aviation. 55 years ago, before my friend Steve Hazy created ILFC, all planes were owned by airlines. There were no leasing companies. He created a leasing company. So today, when you go on an Avianca plane or a Delta plane, 50 to 60% of the planes are not owned by the airlines. They're owned by a leasing company that leases it to the airlines. What does that do for the airline? It frees up balance sheet. It allows them to lease for 5 years instead of owning a plane for 25 years. It allows them to change the equipment. It gives more flexibility. So we had that meeting, and I said to her, listen, Fedra, you please check and come back to me in 24 to 48 hours. If there is no space leasing business, we will set one up. So for the next day or the day after, they come back, dear George, email, there's no space leasing business. Okay, let's do it. So we put the system of Libra into action, and within 120 days from that meeting, our space leasing business, which is called SLI, Space Leasing International, was founded. A team was put together. The IP of leasing we know very well. So what was the first transaction that we did? The first transaction was agreeing with a company on the West Coast to build up to 21 ground stations, where we would effectively finance the construction of a ground station, which is a station that receives the data from the satellites. And the moment they're built, they go on a 9-year lease to our counterpart. So far, we've built 4. I know that we're negotiating a whole range of others. And then it starts moving to satellites. So you think, one big change happened in the satellite market, and that is that SD satellites started being built. These are software defined, which means you can change the software from Earth, like a Tesla. So, I don't know, but some years ago, when you put satellites into space, that's it. It's in space, it's locked. And so I know we are negotiating the acquisition of a few satellites that would end up going on 9-year leases. So that is, I think, one of the examples of how innovative we can be, how empowering we can be. So far, it's gone very well. It doesn't always work well.
Right.
Of course, we have our failures. I mean, we don't have our website that says, here are the failures of Libra. But of course, we have them. The question is not if you fail. You're going to fail. The question is, what do you do when things go wrong? Do you make the same mistakes repeatedly? Well, then something's wrong.
And not to panic and be able to adapt.
Yes.
But let me also ask this. You've come this time to Bogota. We're here in the Innovation for Development Foundation. You came last year when we inaugurated this work. You have worked with us, support us with the Dreamers and Makers program. But you also came this time for an AI conversation.
Yeah.
And I definitely have to ask, having so many lines of business, companies that are integrated into the group, have you thought maybe on doing some investment and creating maybe an AI supplier of services for the whole conglomerate companies?
So, first of all, thank you for what you've done with IND Foundation.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for changing the lives of people that are deserving of it. I was very proud to be here and speak here in this space.
And I was very honored to have you.
And as we were saying before, how organizations get set off is a big driver of the outcome. And I love meeting all those dreamers and makers. I mean, what you guys have done is amazing, and long may it last. And at the end of the day, as you know well, those who love what they do and those who give more than they take are the happiest souls in the world. So thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you so much, George.
In terms of an AI unit, we have not thought about it, but what we are doing is introducing AI progressively through certain group companies that are ready for it. Now, there's good AI and there's bad AI, right? Angel or demon. So I'll give you one example of the good, and then I'll give you one example of the bad. So one example of the good, as I discussed yesterday, was that our shipping business is partnering with an AI robotics company, which is using basically robots to clean the hulls. And they're using AI to understand where to go, where not to go, where they've already cleaned. What that does is it makes the hulls more efficient, it makes the ships more clean. It also, innovation is not just technology. When you inject innovative thinking into a group, you can be innovative thinking in a human way. You can be innovative thinking in an accounting way. It's not just limited to technology. One of the bad examples. So we have an organization that we have a wonderful partnership with a big insurance company in the UK called Elandis, which has $500 million of properties across the United States. And they rent, this is 4,500 units that are rented out. What people have been doing is using AI to fake their credit scores to get apartments. So this took the Elandis people some time to understand. Then Elandis is using other AI
to identify.
So you get to this pyramid of AI, and eventually you get to the top of the pyramid. Who writes the algorithms?
Right.
Like, who writes the algorithms that ultimately drive humanity? What if there's an algorithm writer that says, well, you get points if you're unhappy or you're sad? I mean, that's bad, right? Then all of a sudden people start checking themselves through when they're sad and they feel better. I mean, so I think it's as we discussed yesterday at the and what an event you guys did. I mean,
thank you.
I was very proud to be there. I was telling Carolina, the visuals, the speakers, you guys did an amazing job. But angel or demon? I think, angel, pragmatically, demon, potentially, emotionally.
George, many people see you, see Libra, and obviously there's a great story of success. But I want to, before I move to some more personal questions, ask about 3 principles that guide you that I certainly love to embrace. Empower the underdog, empower women, and empower young people. Those 3 principles you can see are a pattern in every single Libra Group company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thank you. Those 3 principles are very close to my heart. It was my father and my mother that empowered me. They did it together. Mm-hmm. So that's the waterfall of George. That's the waterfall of my brothers. That's how we grew up. Let's talk a little bit about each one. So empower the underdog. What that means is give opportunity to people that have been denied it. And what happens there? That several things happen. One, usually you get a reciprocal amount of human gratitude and loyalty. 2, you have people that are in some ways more keen to become the best version of themselves. 3, it's a meritocratic process. It's not nepotistic. It has to be earned. I mean, look, listen, our internship program is a wonderful program that you've met many of our interns, but they have to work for it. It's not free. Yesterday I met 20 of our former and future Colombian interns at the event, and I said to them, you guys have worked very hard to get into this room, but don't think it's going to be easy. So in some ways, there were underdogs in that room. There was Daniel from Chocó, whose life has been completely changed for the better because of the opportunity he was given. But it wasn't just given, it was taken and then he worked hard. In terms of empower women, so I've always been a feminist. Always believed that, in some ways, the life of a woman can be harder than the life of a man. Easier in other ways, harder in other ways. But I think having grown up in a society in London, where women were disempowered, and seen what that does, the mental health problems that brings, the lack of self-confidence that comes, I wanted to be part of changing that. And so, one of the things I said yesterday about being innovative 30 years ago was hiring women. And it's crazy to say that today, but it started there. I am very proud. We have many female leaders in our organization. But again, the opportunity was what was given. Everything else was earned. It's not easy. Then in terms of empowering young people, it goes back to what my parents did to me and to my brothers. And the feeling of almost changing rapidly when you are given responsibility. But as I said before, that responsibility, if it's married to a anger of failure culture, it's the wrong model. We're going to fail in life. The point is to give people the scaffolding that we don't make the same mistakes and that we always make new mistakes. In some ways, if we make new mistakes, de facto, we're progressing in life.
Right. George, I was telling you before we started this conversation that I was reading a book that has been written by Robin Sharma called The Wealth Money Can't Buy. And obviously, when people see so much success in business, there's a sense, obviously, of richness and wealth and so on. But there are 2 characteristics that define you. And I want to ask about that. One is the way you have faced adversity, the way that you have faced sometimes obstacles. And I know it's a very personal question, but you have reflected on this publicly, how you faced a very complicated, life-threatening circumstance of health in the last 5 years. You overcame, you came out stronger. But another thing is how you praise and love the simplicity of life. Mm-hmm. People like you could have a private plane to move all over the world, but you love airports. You love to see people's stories. You wake up in the morning, you love to go to small cafes, sit on your own, reflect, sometimes write notes about what you're thinking, and it has proven to be a great method for you to work, to create. Why don't we talk about those 3 elements? One, how do you overcome difficulty and how you love difficulty? Because a lot of people face it and they just keep being scared out of it, but you overcame and you took the best out of it. The second, the simplicity of life. And the third, wealth is not in the way that you show off what you have, but instead, how do you multiply, how do you understand the value of things, and how you share those things with society?
Well, I think you've hit on some very profound and humane elements. And, you know, humanity of self can be mortgaged or can be liberated in life. What's a cursing and what's a blessing? I mean, Ivan, how many times in your life or my life have we been cursed by something that we look back upon and we say, that was a blessing. Thank God that happened to us. And the other way around. A blessing, something that appears to be a blessing, but it's actually a curse in disguise. So I think, first of all, it starts with understanding what is good, what is bad, what is a curse, what is a blessing. I was blessed to be cursed with a lot of health problems as a child. So my first memory of being alive in this world is being in an ICU in a hospital in London, having come out of a coma with bacterial meningitis that I should not have survived from, but for the grace of God and for the grace of the genetic suffering of all my ancestors that came before me who blessed me with a strong genetic coding. It's not always the case. Then I went through 34 years of health problems. I was telling Adriana now, I'd taken 300 doses of antibiotics. My body couldn't fight infection. But I never, not one time, resented it. Why? Because I was loved. Because I had my grandmother who adored me. Because I had my mother and my father and my community that adored me. Because Georgie boy was the golden child, but he was the golden child that was always sick. But you don't know when you're 6 years old. You don't know what sickness means. You don't know if you're terminal. 2 days ago we were in a cancer facility in Panama and I meet young children that are really suffering, but they're happy. It's the paradox. Do you choose in life to take the path of bitterness or the path of betterness? The key differentiator for me is community, is love, is understanding where you came from. Like I said yesterday, go to the graveyard of your grandfather. Understand what he had to go through and what freedoms he granted to you that you didn't earn. We're all going to die one day, right? The question is, what are we going to do in the time that we're given? So that's the first point. And that set me up for life. It triggered the humane gene. What is wealth? Man, you know how many houses of billionaires I've been to that are not very happy? 1.5 years ago, at the invitation of President Abinader, we went to Las Mercedes, which is a struggling community in the DR, and I saw more pride in Marissa, who had built her own house. It's a small house, but it's not a billionaire's house, but it was full of wealth because she was proud, because this was a strong community. So it's looking beyond the meaning of words, and it's understanding what the difference between blessings and curses are. And it's also trying to find, I think, a purpose in life where it is greater than just self. You know this. You led this country, 50 million people. You did it for Ivan. You did it for your people.
Right.
So at base, I always go back to that young boy that was dying in hospital. Parents panicked, grandmother, everyone in a total panic. The boy was going to die, and he didn't die by the grace of God. So I will not waste what is vested. Now, what's an obstacle, what's an opportunity, to answer a second part? How many times are obstacles opportunities in disguise? Like I said before, we don't do easy. We have difficulty. There are snakes in the world. There are bunny rabbits as well. Beware of the snakes, they will bite you.
Right.
But then what do you do when that happens? How do you react to that? I will tell you something that I'm very proud of. We had a very difficult time, as you know, as an organization from 2017 to 2021. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud we overcame. I'm not embarrassed we had to endure. I'm proud of what we did. What am I most proud of, Iván? I'm most proud that if you look at the overall Libra Group and Libra Philanthropy, the whole ecosystem, there's between 160 and 180 leaders. So there's thousands of employees at the subsidiaries, 40 people at the parent company, and leaders 160 to 180. And we went through a tsunami. How many people left? How many people abandoned ship? 1. And that makes me very proud. A few people were thrown off the ship, as you know. Right?
Yes.
Bad men will do bad things. 1 left. And I'm very proud of that. That to me is Libra.
George, but Libra is also philanthropy.
Yes.
And that's another element of your life that gives you joy, and I've seen it. When we traveled to Cartagena with your family and we went to see the work of Granitos de Paz and we were talking with community leaders, you could tell that not only it was your consciousness, but it was your love for people present. And you decided that Libra needed to have, as part of the group, as stronger as any other company, a philanthropic branch. And you select where you want to invest, you select where you want to make a change. And I can tell that if there's one thing that makes you extremely happy, is the philanthropic work that you do. Why don't you tell the people who are listening to us why philanthropy matters, why it produces so much joy, and something that is also very important, to be a philanthropist. You don't have to be rich to be a philanthropist. You can be a philanthropist starting this big and growing and expanding and evolving. And I think that's something that not only is a characteristic of you, but also of your family and the impressive work that Nitzia, your best heart, does with you aligned in all these purposes.
Well, thank you. And, you know, one of the most moving moments I think we both had in this year, which has been a great year, was when we went to Granitos and we had that moment, which was one moment, right? What is perfect in life? Few things are perfect, but there are perfect moments. And that moment when we were in the room with 50, 60 of these young people, and these 5 young men and women stood up and had the courage to speak to you and to me and to our families about their stories. That was a very solemn and profound moment. Philanthropy. Look, philanthropy is not social impact. It doesn't have to be. Social impact can be getting eVTOLs, and social impact can be building a commercially viable solar facility in partnership with Arhuacos. Philanthropy is Filantropía. What does that mean? It means friend of mankind. You have studied the ancient Greeks. Yesterday, I was in a home for young girls called All God's Children. There was a 19-year-old girl called Lisa Marie that was studying the ancient Greeks. She had her list. She's 19 years old. We will take her to Greece. She doesn't know that yet, okay? But if you look at the writings of the ancients, which in many ways are purer than the writings of us, philanthropy is giving without expecting to get. This is the purest form.
What a great definition.
But giving can be many things. Giving can be money. Giving can be advice. Giving can be time. Giving can be belief.
Can be love, can be
love.
support, can
Absolutely.
be listening.
It can be many things. So that's what you said about you don't need to be rich to be a philanthropist. Absolutely right, because philanthropist is Filantropía. It is giving without expecting to get. It is you enrich yourself through the act of giving. And you can never take enough in this world. You take enough into a vacuum of nothingness and you become miserable. So before we came to Colombia, I'm sorry, yesterday was this big match. And I said to
remember that.
I said to my team, I said, no, I'm not seeing the match. We are going to do a social visit. You please do it. So yesterday we spent 1 hour with philanthropists. Nice. With Jessica, a 19-year-old girl that after the meeting she came up to me and said, when am I going to see you again? With a lady, 23-year-old girl, I don't remember her name, that wants to be the president of Colombia one day. So We gave 1 hour of our time at the end of the day. It wasn't a lot of time, but I believe that we helped change the lives of those young girls.
George, I know we're approaching the end of this conversation, and I could ask many things, but I want to talk about the heroes that we share. We share a passion for Winston Churchill. We also have a passion for Shimon Peres. We have a passion for Marcus Aurelius, and we can talk about many figures in history. But those two that I mentioned first, Churchill and Shimon Peres, we've had conversations of hours about them. What do you like about Churchill? What is your daily thought about Churchill? And also, what do you like about Shimon Peres, and what would you like to emulate from Shimon Peres' leadership?
So it is amazing because we share the same heroes. That's well put. And heroes are important. We all need people to aspire to. Aspiration. Why don't people use the word aspiration more? Why don't people use the word valor more? Heroism, hero. Maybe we should have a chat with the guy at the top of the algorithmic pyramid and say, put aspiration into it. So Churchill saved the world with his words. That is the essence of leadership to me. It is motivating a nation which is on the verge of failing with words, injecting faith that does not exist through this to a nation of 40, 45 million people that were on the verge of catastrophe. If it wasn't for him, the world would be a much darker place. He had a phalanx of falsehoods thrown at him his whole life, but he never gave up. He knew his truth and he stuck to it. And then God presses the button and he's in power and he gets on this and he saves the world. So that to me is that's the epitome. Selfless, being able to compartmentalize the phalanx of falsehoods that are thrown at you, put it to one side, you focus to your mission, you stay true to yourself, and eventually he overcame. Shimon Peres was a guy who lived 60 years throughout the creation and founding of the modern state of Israel. I met him many times. The last time he came, he left Israel, he came to have dinner with us in Greece, and I can say that he was the wisest soul that I have met. You know, at one point he said to me, I asked him a question, and he said, George, we did it because we were blessed to have nothing. And these words made they summarized my life in one sentence. I was a sick boy, Ivan. I grew up sick. Hospitals, doctors. Is he going to make it? Is he okay? Oh, he's sick again. What are we going to do? Was that nothing? Or is that everything? Well, I chose to make it everything. And we need heroes.
There's another hero that we share, and his name is John McCain.
Yes.
So I know you were close to him. I had the privilege to have many conversations with him. And he was a prisoner of war for a long time. And I know you had a conversation with him, and he left you with a phrase that we shared in our conversations that we had in Greece, where he said, you have to use your brain to overcome the pain. And I think that's such a phrase that is applicable to many moments and circumstances in life. How do you apply that phrase on a daily basis?
Well, first of all, he was a brilliant man. He was a hero. Like, when you're with him, you feel like I don't want to say John Wayne, but like you're with a hero, right? He's almost the perfect definition of someone that overcame adversity and became the best version of himself. And the last time I saw him in Washington, at the end of 2017, I asked him, how, Senator, did you overcome everything to become what you are? How you went through 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton, you were tortured, and we were sitting next to each other at dinner. And he banged the table, right? He said, George, there were two reasons. One, they were never going to beat me. Two, I used my brain to override the pain. And those words helped save my life. How? I'll give you one example. I guess this is a closing example of Ivan and George's conversation. I had a another round of health issues in 2017 for a period of a few years. One of them was I had gout. Gout is extremely painful, but it is literally the most painful thing that I have experienced in my life. I mean, it is so painful. There was a time where I had to give a speech. And I had to project strength at the time. I had to. I knew in my brain I had to, but I was in excruciating pain. So I said, okay, McCain said, use your brain to override the pain. I've done this before with less painful matters. George, you're going to do it. So I went to the event, and I was hobbling. I could hardly walk, and I knew I couldn't hobble. I could not appear weak. I had to look strong. So I went into the restroom, and I meditated for 5 minutes. And I said to myself, in my brain, you will override the pain. You will walk out of here, and you will be strong. So I did. But he gave me the opening of confirmation that it's possible.
George, my last question.
Yes.
We both both got married young. We have big families. You have 4, I have 3 kids. We've shared many family time together. But there's something that defines you as well, and it's Nitzia. And Nitzia nitsifies your environment, the family environment, and she has been a support for you in multiple circumstances, but also, as well as Maria Juliana does, they're very good at alerting us from danger. What's the secret of that beautiful family, and how would you describe her?
Well, first of all, Mahu is nitsified, and I noticed that when I met her. Yesterday, when we were at All God's Children, there was a room that was nitsified, and I took the head of the foundation. I said, "This room is nitsified." I explained it to her. Listen, how did I meet her? What if I hadn't gone to that dinner, or if she hadn't gone to that dinner? What do we control, really, in life? And what is fate, faith, or destiny? So it started with going to a dinner, and I saw this young girl at the time at the dinner, young lady, and immediately I knew. There was no hesitation. We knew each other, Iván. I don't have to speak to communicate to my wife. And she doesn't have to speak to communicate to me. That is the greatest blessing. So I can be traveling around the world, have some stress, and she will feel pain in her neck. And she will tell me, "George, what's wrong with you?" So what's the secret? The secret is simplicity. The secret is we have much to be grateful for, whatever comes our way. It starts with gratitude. Gratitude comes from perspective. No perspective, hard to have gratitude. If you can't have gratitude, you can't be happy. Selflessness. So I'll end with something that I'm very proud of. My wife, when I met her, wanted to be a doctor. And then she got into George's life and chaos, and like Iván's life of chaos, and she couldn't be a doctor. But she got other degrees, but she couldn't get her doctorate. A month ago, a Greek university comes to me, us, and says, "Listen, they have an honorary doctorate that they would like to give to either Nitzia or to George." I said, "No, Nitzia." So we had a birthday celebration when it was Nitzia's 41st birthday. I wrote a letter. We had all 4 children in the room, and I read the letter. I said, "Nitzia, you came, you've committed 20 years to our relationship. Look what we've done. Look at the children, blah, blah. You're going to be a doctor." And I told the university, "No, you please make my wife the honorary doctorate of your university, not me."
Well, that's not only a deserved
Yes.
degree for her, but also it also shows how solid is your bonding.
Yeah.
And George, in Colombia we have a word that we call the ñapa, which is like the last of the last question. What are you
Okay.
reading? What are you reading nowadays? What do you have in your night table?
So what I'm reading nowadays is actually 2 books. One is Bob Woodward, War. Very interesting.
Is it good?
Oh yeah, you have to read it.
Okay.
It's good. The second is very interesting. It is FDR's Mentors. And it's fascinating because we all have heroes. Even heroes have heroes. Even the great generals, field marshals, have their hero, of which they aspire to be.
You know the name of that book? I'm going to look for it.
You know, I'll get it for you. You don't look for it. You give me the Oura ring, and I'll give you the book.
Good.
Actually, you give me the pin,
Yeah.
and I'll give you a book in exchange. I'll get you the book, FDR's Mentors. I'm sure Juliana's writing it down right now as we speak.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and it's always a pleasure to see you in Colombia. Thank you for trusting in Innovation for Development Foundation. Thank you for loving the Dreamers and Makers program. But most importantly, thank you for your friendship, and thank you for being in Tres Respuestas.
Thank you. Presidente.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Super chévere. You liked it?